Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and of course, continuing on with Robert Zemeckis Movie Week. And yes, that's right, you read the title, you know what I'm reviewing next, and as was teased in the last review video, this one Zemeckis film where Zemeckis attempting this film to be in the style of an Alfred Hitchcock film. And you know what? He succeeded on that, yes. And with the great talents, the two main leads of this film, Michelle Pfeiffer, Harrison Ford, and everybody else, can't forget to mention them, that were a part of this movie, what was brought to this one film that Zemeckis directed, and for this to be in the style of a Hitchcock film, and this being another one where there's a couple of other films that are in that same kind of style as a Hitchcock film, like, good example, and one of my favorites, Charade. Yeah. Just, this movie is fantastic. It's definitely, I would say, yeah, an underrated gem of Zemeckis's, pretty much, yeah. But, you know, because this movie has its great moments, its appreciation, and I really enjoy this movie. I know my parents do. Yeah, that's right. From 2000, it's What Lies Beneath. Yes, What Lies Beneath. Yeah, again, this movie is fantastic, and again, Zemeckis succeeding on making this film in the style of a Hitchcock film. From beginning to end, the suspense, the clues, the mystery, what you're not expecting in this movie. Oh yeah, definitely. The surprise reveal / twist in the third and final act of this movie. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and not to mention, fun fact, and maybe you guys probably know this by now, that, Zemeckis, he did this movie while another movie of his, which being another, masterpiece of his, it was on halt. And basically, while that other movie of his was, was put on hold, he and the same crew working on that other movie would do What Lies Beneath. I'm, of course, talking about Castaway. If you know that story, you know. So, yeah. And, the year 2000 was a big year for Zemeckis, managing to get 2 movies of his out that same year. That was a record for him, and the first time that he got 2 movies of his out that same year. What Lies Beneath came out first, and then later that year, Castaway. So, yeah. Both What Lies Beneath and Castaway being 2 really great films of his coming out that same year. Yeah. But, yeah, for What Lies Beneath, it's a really great movie, and, with the first things I have to say about it, well, yeah, but this is not the first time I've seen this, because, well, I did a rewatch on this. Obviously, I had to, because when I knew I would be reviewing this, but yeah, I've watched this movie a good chunk of times, and, and I'm pretty sure, as I recall, the very first time that I watched this fully, oh, of course, I really enjoyed it. I really do. And even rewatching it, of course I still do. How can you not? Yeah, again, Zemeckis, he nailed it at, having this movie being in the style of a Hitchcock film, another film which Hitchcock never directed. That's the same thing that they say with Charade, But yeah, just overall, What Lies Beneath, it's an underrated gem of Zemeckis's, without a doubt. Yeah. Okay, so, as always, for me, read the description / the story. It had been a year since Dr. Norman Spencer betrayed his beautiful wife, Claire, but with Claire oblivious to the truth, Norman's life and marriage seem so perfect that when Claire tells him of hearing mysterious voices and seeing a young woman's image in their home, he dismisses her terror as delusion. Claire moves closer to the truth, and it becomes clear that this appreciation will not be dismissed, and has come back for Dr. Spencer and his beautiful wife. Okay, so getting into the film itself, because first off, the setting and location of this movie being in Vermont. Yeah, Vermont. The movie opening where we see some water and this, like, creepy, scary face lunging, and then we see one of the main characters, Claire Spencer, being played by good old Michelle Pfeiffer, because she was taking a bath, and, even, like, after what just happened, and presumably she was daydreaming, obviously, and even when, like, she hooks up the hair dryer, like, she gets a bit of an electric shock because, her finger's still being wet. Well, today, Claire's daughter, Caitlin, being played by Catherine Town, I think, I am saying her last name right, and again, you know me sometimes, Claire's daughter is about to head off to college, and we also get the introduction of Claire's husband, Dr. Norman Spencer, being played by good old Harrison Ford. And to go ahead and point this out, Norman is, the stepfather of Caitlin, because, Claire, having Caitlin at a young age, and also we learn later that Claire, she used to be a musician and so on, but when she met Norman, she stopped being a musician and so on. So also, Claire noticing new neighbors that have arrived, and noticing, things getting a little intense between the new neighbors, the couple, the Fewers. I think I'm saying the last name right. Claire and Norman, when dropping off Caitlin to college, Claire trying to keep it together, because, it's understandable, and when we learn how much Claire and her daughter were so close, and also Claire's college roommate that we don't get that much of, and that's the thing, we don't get that much of Caitlin in this movie, and of course that goes for her roommate, Beatrice, Beatrice, being played by Victoria Bidwell. Norman interacting with Beatrice, and very nice of him saying that, take care of each other, and Beatrice assuring Norman that, to not have Caitlin go to a local bar without company. So, of course. Hey, somebody's got to keep an eye on someone, sometimes, Anyways, Claire, she did her best, but still can't help but feel emotional with what has happened, saying goodbye for now to her daughter, as, she's gonna be at college for a while. And coming back to their house, one moment where Claire is looking at some family pictures, but then starts to stumble upon some, like, newspaper, pieces of newspaper, and a picture of a young Norman Spencer with his late father. And if I remember correctly, because, Norman, he lost his father, and actually, he was a respected doctor more than his son. So, and so by noticing, like, newspaper articles and a picture of a wrecked car and so on, like, what's going on and with those pictures? And, even when Claire at one point steps outside of the house and she gets, a bit emotional, and then she hears someone else crying, and it's Mr. Fewer. Mr. Fewer is having a bit of a breakdown, and Claire is wondering what is going on, and, and obviously since she saw what happened, early on, that there was a little bit of, of an argument between, the Fewer, Mr. and Mrs. Fewer. Even when there was one moment where it seemed like, they were, making things out, where, later that evening and after, they dropped off Caitlin to college, there was one moment where Claire and Norman, they started to fool around, and then they hear some moaning from next door, and it's Mrs. Fewer, and, and as Norman says, I guess they're making things up. Probably so, and even Claire tells Norman to keep the windows open. Do you think we can take it, he asks? It's worth a try, and God. But yeah, anyways, so again, when Claire is concerned for Mrs. Fewer and wondering what she's so upset about, and when, she says to Claire that she can't take this, and this having to do something with her husband, and he's not home at this very moment, but when he does come back and in his car, that's when, she had to run back inside and so on. And slowly but surely, Claire starts to get very suspicious and concerned with Mrs. Fewer. Like, yeah, what is really going on next door, and what's up with Mr. Fewer? And, and Warren Fewer, being played by James Remar. Yeah, James Remar. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I've seen him in other movies. And even when Claire starts to talk with Norman about this, but Norman telling Claire at one point that, couples fight and it's none of our business, couples, people and such, But yeah, Claire's still getting, concerned about what's going on next door, even when at times she's, staring and slash spying with binoculars. And, when things get a bit intense and, when like seeing a car or some certain things, just, yeah. And even, like, there is one moment where Claire, she's playing fetch with the family dog. If I remember to do so, yeah, I'll put the name of the family's dog in a text, yeah, so, well, because the dog is, apparently something's up with the dog, like, not wanting to, go jump in the water, because they live by a lake, okay? They live by a lake/river, and they have, like, a dock and such, and the dog is not wanting to go in the water, and when she tries to, retrieve the ball, she then notices something in the water, what looks like a face, and at one point, a little later, she believes that maybe it's Mrs. Fewer, and when she believes that maybe Mr. Fewer, I should say, might have killed his wife. And, the first time that you watch this, it makes you think that it's probably that, because, anybody who watches this movie the first time, you have no idea what the heck is going on at first. And even when she had to, she was feeling uncomfortable, being alone at home, and when visiting her husband at work and such, and even when she noticed something that, Norman Spencer's fellow workers were doing, one of them was Teddy, because Teddy being played by, well, is he? Yeah, here he is, yeah. Teddy being played by Elliot Gortowski, if I'm saying his last name right. Basically, this thing that's called halothen, if I'm even pronouncing that right. If you know what it is, and basically, to knock out, the bodies and, leaving them the body conscious and paralyzed and so on. They're testing it on a mouse or a rat, whichever which. And it's actually, very later on in the movie, it's one of the key elements of this movie, like important parts of the film, I should say, the stuff to have the body be paralyzed for a little bit. Yeah. And to speed things up, because the more Claire grows concerned for Mrs. Fewer, and where she might think that she thinks for a little bit that maybe she did get murdered by her husband. And even when there was one moment where Claire is paid a visit from a good friend of hers named Jody, being played by Diana Scarwid. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. The interactions that they have at times in this movie, and even when Jody brought her something, and even when she showed Claire that she got a brand new car. Lose a husband, if you lose a husband, buy a car, and even Claire asking Jody, you gonna pick up guys with that car? So I have one, the back of the trunk, as she says. Jody was a pretty interesting character in this, definitely. Yeah. And still to speed things up, because, again, the more suspicious and how concerned she becomes, even when at one point Claire was dropping off a gift basket, welcoming the neighbors and so on, which being the viewers. And, well, once again, things are not looking normal when she approaches the house, even noticing a shoe on the front porch. And obviously, it's Mrs. Fewer's shoe. And she puts it on, on top of the porch, and, well, she did notice at one point that a car is there, and that's obviously Mr. Fewer's car. And then Mr. Fewer stepping in, Warren Fewer. Again, Warren Fewer being played by James Remar. Claire trying to play it casually, like, not to show him that, and giving him the gift basket and asking him where his wife is, and yeah, he's definitely acting suspicious, not letting Claire know where his wife is and such, and it really seems like that maybe he is a psychopath and he might have done something to his wife. That's what we think at first, but until very later on. And, well, because she now starts to presume that Mrs. Fewer is dead, well, Norman, a little later on, growing concerned for Claire and thinking that she's going a bit crazy or something like that, with how she feels towards this. Even at one point, he had Claire be set up to see a psychiatrist, and that's what happens. She meets with Dr. Drayton. I think, I'm saying his last name right. Being played by Joe Morton. Yeah, Joe Morton. And the talk and conversations that the two of them have, and when she shares to the doctor, what she's feeling and about Mrs. Fewer and so on, and him asking her if she's taken any medication, but only one, and that's for her to help her go to sleep. He even offered her something to snack on, nice of him. It was, spicy, but still delicious. And even, Claire, at one point gets a Ouija board. Because she was saying to the doctor, "What do you want me to do? What are you suggesting? I should go and buy a Ouija board?" And yeah, that's what she does. And alongside with her, Jody, they have a little seance, because with the Ouija board in the bathroom, and Claire, she took Mrs. Fewer's shoe, because you have to have something to try to contact with the spirit of so-and-so, and that's what they tried to do. And when it seems at one point that maybe something is happening and gets a little scary, but even when, the bathroom door, it's creaking, but it was the dog, that the dog startled them. And a couple of times where, Claire would see, a couple of times I should say, where she would see the face of the ghost, and maybe it is Mrs. Fewer. We think so, but we can't be really sure. Well, still, her, still presuming that, Mrs. Fewer has been murdered, and when trying to get Norman to believe her and so on. Also, other moments to mention, because, Norman, telling Claire that she needs to get ready because they were going to have dinner with, Dr. Stan Powell, and, presumably, his wife, Elena. And, well, apparently, Elena and Claire, they've known each other, and it's a happy reunion for them. And the conversations that they each have with one another, it goes pretty well. And, Dr. Stan Powell, being played by Ray Baker, Baker, and Elena, being played by Wendy Crewson. She would probably be best known for being in the Santa Claus movies, Scott Calvin's ex-wife, the mother of Charlie. But also, she was in another movie with Harrison Ford, and she played his on-screen wife in The Air Force One. Good movie, and I'm sure some of you have seen it, yeah. "Get off my plane." That's one quote that I remember so well from Air Force One, so yeah. Again, the sequence where they're talking and while they're at dinner, even a mention of, Dr. Norman's late father. Yeah. And even when he mentions, and maybe possibly, that his old man is haunting them in their house. Maybe, but later on, that's not the case. But anyways, and yeah, even Claire, her still getting frightened about what's happening with, presumably the ghost of Mrs. Fewer, if it is, and just, yeah, and how Norman feels towards this. And when, she even told Norman later on about her and Jody using an Ouija board and such. And still, to speed things up, there is a moment where she, met up with her husband at work, and Norman, out of nowhere, just but this has nothing to do with him, and we know this, and what she's been doing. Norman takes this the wrong way at first, where he asks and confronts her, is it because of my work? You don't support my work and so on, that, how he says it, but this has nothing to do with him. And that's what she says to him. And a little later, while they're at the office, she happens to notice, Mr. Get my Mr. and Mrs. mixed up. Mr. Fewer happens to be there, and she flat out confronts him. You killed her, you son of a bitch, and such. And, well, just right as she confronts him, and she's kind of making a scene, Mary steps out. She's perfectly all right. Yeah, Mary Fewer. She's all right, and Warren assuring Claire that I didn't kill my wife, and Norman apologizing for what's happened and what, Claire did. And Mary Fewer, being played by Miranda Otto. She would probably be best known for being in the Lord of the Rings films, as well as the Netflix series Chilling Adventures with Sabrina. Yeah, but a lot more than that, but still, those are the two best well-known things that she's done. Yeah. Anyways, so after that, there was even a moment where Mary, she did talk with Claire and apologizing when she got upset, and having Claire be misunderstood with why she was upset. Because, and to put it this, Mary, just having a very difficult time with moving into a new house and all that, and with items, and how she says it to Claire, and more on Warren Fewer, because, yeah, when we find out that he didn't kill his wife, and, with what Claire has been seeing, a ghost and so on, well, it was never Mrs. Fewer, but still, Warren still acted, suspicious, even when there was one moment, and later that evening, after Claire dropped the gift basket, she's watching and spying Warren, and we see that he's having TV dinner, and he's eating by himself, and there's one moment where he steps outside of the front porch, and he throws the flowers from the gift basket, but he takes the bottle of wine with him back inside. Well, at least, he appreciates that, but I don't know, I'm just saying. But, yeah, he was definitely acting suspicious, but we now know why. And because when Mary talked with Claire about why she was so upset and so on, so everything's patched up, but still, there's something not quite right, and it's not over yet, because, yeah, with Claire seeing a ghost, and now that she knows that it was never Mrs. Fewer, well, what's this all about still? Well, as the film proceeds, we slowly but surely still learn more details and information, and what Clara is slowly but surely learning. What she saw in the river, and also noticing a key, a necklace, and, the mysterious murder of this woman, and when she, starts to learn about this woman who died just over a year ago, and, when, yeah, the house is really being haunted, and still, to speed things up, because, one moment where Claire is being haunted and, asking, what do you want from me, and just so on. And something is being written on the bathroom mirror, because, of the steam and such, and it says, yeah. And even when there was one moment where a computer activated itself, and Claire noticing this, and these three letters that read MEF. What does that mean specifically? Still, as the film proceeds, what she learns from those three letters, and even when what she finds out when, there's one moment where she and Norman, they go to this party, the DuPont party. Yeah. Obviously this has to do with, where Norman works, I presume, but yeah. Even when she, came face to face with the Fewers again, and Warren Fewer just, messing with Claire, just going for his wife's throat, just, messing around, what she finds out at the DuPont party, and with those three letters still, to go ahead and, say this, the three letters, M.E. Frank, they stand for a woman by the name of Madison Elizabeth Frank. Yeah, and, what she learns from this woman who tragically died over a year ago in 1998, because, it's obvious that the time and setting of this movie is in 1999, which, obviously that's when they filmed the movie, so, yeah. When she also, slowly but surely, discovering that maybe, Norman could have something to do with this, the mysterious death of Madison Elizabeth Frank, and even when she confronts it about him at times, and even when a couple of more times she met with the psychiatrist, and even when there's one moment her attempt to get this chest that was, underwater, and she tried to get it, and, because even when there was a key, and, Norman, he saved her life from drowning and such, and, even when, there's one moment where, Claire, when she discovers about Madison Elizabeth Frank, even when she gets presumably possessed by Madison Elizabeth Frank, and when at one point when Norman comes back home and is greeted by a very seductive Claire, but presumably she's being possessed. And that sequence where she's getting a little too aggressive, biting on Norman by the lip and so on, and having him eat an apple, and really just trying to go at it. And, even when she sees a reflection in the mirror of someone coming in the front door of the house, and that's when... And when Clara snaps out of it, she's no longer presumably possessed. I think it's obvious, she was being possessed. She then realizes that Norman, last year, had an affair with this college girl, and that being Madison. And she is, she's hurt by this, and just, staying away from Norman. She leaves the house that evening and stays over at Jody's, talking about what has happened, and the conversations that they each have, and talking about Norman. And even when at one point Norman ringed up Jody's place and left a voicemail, letting Jody know that he's worried about Claire and so on. The next day, Claire does come back, but what she finds when she comes back in the house, up in the bathroom, Norman is in the bathtub, and he apparently tried to kill himself by, turning on the faucet in the bathtub, and by throwing a hairdryer in the bathtub. Oh my gosh, yeah. But he's lucky he survived from that. And when, the doctors show up, even Dr. Stan Powell and Elena, when they show up and checking on Claire, and Norman, and it all turns out good. It all turns out fine in the end. And yeah, still, Claire confronting Norman about this, and when Norman is, assuring her that he tried, for this to stop, and, he slipped up, and what happened between him and this college student, and, when, it seems like, he might have had nothing to do with what happened to her when she died or something, but maybe possibly, but still, what happens, and just, yeah. Even when Madison met early on with a relative of Madison Elizabeth Franks to get more information and details on, the late Madison, her mother, Mrs. Frank, and Mrs. Frank being played by Nicole Mercurio, if I'm even saying her full name right. Again, you know me sometimes, but yeah. What Mrs. Frank tells Claire about her late daughter, and, really good at what she was doing, and because she was a college student. And even when at one point, Claire discovered a piece of hair from Madison, like a piece of a ponytail or something, the ribbon, pink ribbon that is. And yeah, that's what did lead into presumably her being possessed. So yeah. And even later on, they burned that piece of hair, Norman and Claire, especially Norman. And still, to speed things up, because, yeah, at one point, when Norman comes back home from work, he hears an instrument playing, and it's Claire playing, and she basically tells Norman that she now accepts that she's dead, Madison Elizabeth Frank. And after that, there's one moment where Claire and Norman, they sail out in the river, one last sail for the year, and there's even a mentioning of this place called Adamant, I think I'm saying that right, and because of, the whole thing of, bed and breakfast and such, And, because, yeah, and the place is, yeah, it's a fictional version of a little, an incorporated hamlet called Amendment, yeah, so, anyways, it's a pretty old, cool quarry, okay, but anyways, so, yeah, but then, the more, things that she discovers, at one point, she is taking another bath, and she discovers a key on the floor, and she heads to the location of Adamant, and noticing, a window display where she sees the exact same necklace that came from Madison, and it's all coming together slowly but surely for her. And even when once again confronting Norman about this, and if he had something to do with her death, and because, unintentionally having an affair with her and so on, and what led to her death, and even when it's mentioned that Madison wanted to kill Norman, as well as Claire, and so on. And even when, later on, Claire, she does finally dive in the water and, recovers the chest, and what she discovers in that chest, and yeah, it's really, really coming together to her, and where maybe he really had something to do with it, and by killing her, but still, Norman assuring her that, yeah, he didn't do anything like, killing her intentionally or so on, and, begging for forgiveness. And even when, there was a couple of phone calls that he took, and because, of what was going on with Claire, of, calling up the doctor and so on. But then, it all comes down to when they have to phone in the police, send in an officer, crossing the bridge, and, because of what's going on. And, yeah, and Claire, she's gonna get all dolled up and such, dressed up, and when the officer comes in, and because of this, with the evidence, and what was in the chest, and with Madison, at one point, the WTF moment, I should say, we get this, a WTF moment where, yeah, Norman is really the villain, and he really intentionally Madison, and using that same stuff that we saw very early on, that they were using, the halogen, yeah. And yeah, putting it on her face and having her entire body be paralyzed, and taking her to the bathtub and is going to basically drown her where the water rises and she's unable to breathe. And Norman, well, how he explains it to her, he tried his best, for this to, be set aside and for life going as normal for him and Claire. But yeah, that's not the case. And yeah, you didn't see this coming, right? Nobody did. And I'm sure for you guys watching this for the first time, you did not see at that moment that Norman showing his true colors and that he's really the villain of this story. Again, Robert Zemeckis nailing at making this film being in the style of a Hitchcock film. Because when you watch the Hitchcock films, you don't know what is going to happen, you don't expect these certain things, and the other films that I mentioned, like most notably Charade, where, yeah, in that style of an Alfred Hitchcock film, and with that, What Lies Beneath, amazing! It's really amazing! And that's what makes these kind of movies masterpieces and so detailed, like, you get my point, yeah. So again, with what I was saying, him throwing Claire into the bathtub and drowning her, and even when the dog showed up, and the dog didn't even suspect anything, nor did the dog attack Norman. Well, because, yeah, again, the dog didn't really smell couldn't really smell and detect, what Norman was doing and so on. But, yeah, it's understandable, And there's one moment where, yeah, this was a jump scare for sure, because the necklace that Claire was wearing, the same kind of one that Madison had, on the back of her neck and just, puts her head back. But then, when, putting her head back, and that's when we see the face of the ghost. And there were a few times that it was mentioned that how the girl, Madison, looked almost similar. Maybe not even close to Mrs. Fewer, but when that was all established, with the Fewers. But, most notably, almost looking exactly like Claire, yeah. So, a jump scare where Norman does see the face of the ghost, yeah. And, again, that's a jump scare for sure, right? Don't tell me you did not get jump scared by that, just... So, how can you not? Even when, you watch these kind of movies for the first time. So, yeah. Norman, he is startled by this, but he knocks himself out, like, on the sink and such, and yeah, he's bleeding, and even when he tries to, pull himself together, wake up, but yeah, he deliberately collapses, yeah, so he's definitely unconscious from that, bad hit. And as for Claire, well, her struggling, trying to, lift the chain out of, the drain of the bathtub. And even when at one point the chain detached, from the suction part, but thankfully she managed to get the water in the bathtub to drain out, and even when her body was still paralyzed, but it was slowly but surely starting to, regain the strength and so on. Yeah, but overall, she managed to drain the water out of the bathtub, and her trying to get herself out of the bathtub, Norman is nowhere in sight. Where did he go? And when she's like crawling and just trying to get out of the bathtub, trying to find where Norman is, and when she does have full conscious and, in full control of her body again, no longer being paralyzed that much, and when at one point, she did see where Norman was, it did freak her out at one point, he's downstairs, and yeah, he's still, collapsed on the floor. And Claire's attempt to, get in contact with the police and so on, and even when she makes a run for it, taking one of the vehicles, she ends up taking the one that is attached, that has a boat attached to it, the truck. She was unable to take one of the other cars because, yeah, wrong key, so yeah. the key for that being for the red truck. So yeah, her escaping and fleeing from Norman, but she notices that, well, Norman might have gotten up and, well, where exactly is he? We don't see him, and, well, presumably he might have slipped in under the cover of the boat, and probably, yeah, that's what led him to jump in the back of the truck. And if it's not obvious, and even when when she makes her way to the bridge and trying to get a signal, yeah, and then we see at one point, Norman is right there. He breaks through the back of the truck window, grabbing her by the neck, and, well, this leads them plummeting into the river, where the bridge is. And, that's when where the truck is underwater, the vehicle that has the corpse of Madison and Madison Elizabeth Frank, being played by Amber Valletta, if I'm saying her last name right. Again, you know me sometimes. The corpse, in some ways, yeah, it comes to life, and, when Norman was going to drown Claire to, keep things silent with all that happened last year and such, well, that doesn't last long when the corpse of Madison Elizabeth Frank emerges and goes for Norman, causing him to drown. She takes him with him, and Claire, she manages to get out of there. So, yeah, and also with the necklace and so on, and golly, the graphics of the corpse of Madison Elizabeth Frank, disgusting, but when we see the corpse, turning back into a young, beautiful version of her, that kind of thing. And, yeah, ultimately, Norman, he meets his demise, and that's the end of him. Yeah. And the ending to this movie, right after that, well, we then see Claire at a gravesite, cemetery, leaving a flower on top of the tombstone of Madison Elizabeth Frank, and her walking off, and then, yeah, boom, the movie ends. Wow, just what a heck of a way to end off the movie right there. Just perfect. Am I not wrong? Just perfect how this movie ended. Just, from beginning to end, how this movie turned out. Just, yeah, what more do I have to say? What Lies Beneath is definitely an underrated masterpiece of Zemeckis's, just without a doubt. The story, the characters, Zemeckis's attempt on this film being in the style of a Hitchcock film, which again, he definitely succeeded on that. The suspense, the horror vibes, and, the spooky moments, the jump scares, stuff that you didn't expect, and, you thought that maybe this was the case with Mrs. Fewer, but it turned out not to be. And with the whole mystery of the ghost, and which turned out to be Madison Elizabeth Frank, and how slowly but surely, maybe possibly Norman had something to do with Madison's death, which turns out he did. He murdered her, and the betrayal, and just, the reveal that he's the villain, the music and score by the one and only Alan Silvestri, Zemeckis' direction, the suspense, the action, the climax, and with the rest of the cast of characters, besides Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, everybody else from Joe Morton, Miranda Otto, James Remar, Catherine Town, Victoria Bidwell, and some of the other cast members to quickly mention, there were 2 PhD students being played by Denison Samaru, Jennifer Tung, and 2 other more. PhD student number 3 and 4, Rachel Singer, Daniel Zellman, Dr. Stan Powell, Ray Baker, and Elena Wendy Crewson, and Amber, who plays Madison Elizabeth Frank, Mrs. Templeton, being played by Salone Shelton, and Dean Templeton, being played by Tom Dahlgren, and everybody else, even those that were uncredited. They all did a fantastic job in this movie. Just overall, What Lies Beneath is, without a doubt, an underrated masterpiece of Robert Zemeckis's. And I'm giving What Lies Beneath, well, what the heck, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for What Lies Beneath. And what about you guys? What did you think of What Lies Beneath itself? The very first time that you watched this, you didn't know what to expect. And if you were getting that feel that, yeah, this film being in the style of a Hitchcock film, which again, Zemeckis nailed at it, and if you guys think so too, yeah. What were some of your favorite moments? Moments that you did not expect, and with, the reveal, the twists, and who the real villain is, and yeah, which being Norman, what he's really like, and, a lot of other crazy stuff that happened, great moments here and there from beginning to end. Just, yeah, what more do I have to say? Overall, what do you think of What Lies Beneath itself, and with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of What Lies Beneath. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, continuing on, of course, with Robert Zemeckis Movie Week, and the next film I will be reviewing of Zemeckis's, well, since I brought it up early on, and I'm pretty sure you know what is more likely to be coming next. Yeah. Again, that same year, with What Lies Beneath, another movie of Zemeckis's came out late that year. Yeah, it's Castaway. Is it not obvious? Yeah. Again, stay tuned for that. Take care, and peace out.